Who's the historical Hiram Abiff?
Now, Hiram Abiff, I only came to realize his importance recently, really, 2 years or 3 years ago, when I started about 30 years ago my research trying to identify biblical characters from historical sources. I started according to the biblical chronology. I started by Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph in Egypt, because it's the connection, and then Moses, and then obviously after, it's supposed to be after about 400 years from Moses, we have David and Abraham, David and Solomon, and then only a long time after that we find Christ in the first century AD. This is the chronology of my. But now, having done this research, I come obviously to. I do identify these people as real and events as real historical characters. Obviously, written in a kind of mythological, magical kind of situation. But they come. Because when archaeologists and historians started looking,
real characters.
Yeah, when the archaeologists and historians started to look for these people in history, they didn't find any evidence, because what I came to understand and realize, because the Bible put them in the wrong time and in the wrong place. So my chronology now comes differently completely. For me, David comes first, and he's a contemporary of Abraham. And from David comes Isaac, and then Jacob, and then Solomon, and then Moses, and then Joshua, who is a historical Jesus in my view. And then a long time from that comes Christianity. But Christ, historical Christ, died a long time before Christianity became revealed as a new religion. Okay. And the backbone of the history of Christianity is really came to be Hiram Abiff. It is he who kept the message of Christ all these years, although he died a few years before historical Christ, but it was through Hiram Abiff, the character who is known.
Was Christ, Hiram Abiff?
No, he was not. He was an ordinary person, but he became. People after his death regarded him. He became a mediator between man and God. He became a mediator. I will have to talk about that more in details when we come to talk about historical Christ and what is really Christianity. Okay. But for the time being, after finishing all these researches, I came, in fact, I have to tell the truth, I have, through the Masonic teaching, to understand the importance of Hiram Abiff. Although the Masons obviously don't reveal all their knowledge, but they have their books, and their books contain their information about their beliefs and so on. So early in 1717, early in the 17th century, the Masons, when they were established, obviously it is a new kind of establishment, a new group. But from the very start, it was clear that they had a line before them, and the teaching, the rituals, the memories indicate that they have the roots going back to ancient times, and in my understanding, specifically to Egypt in the time of the Gnostic philosophy of the 1st century and 2nd century AD. I mean, then when they start, for them, the Temple of Solomon, the Kabbalah and the Temple of Solomon is the center point. And Hiram Abiff is a more important character, yes. Because at the time, in fact, as I understand, they started to, because all the information, written information, and open knowledge was completely banned by the church. The church would burn any kind of documents, and they would kill anybody who, I mean, they regarded them as heretics, and they were not accepted, especially so that the way they regard themselves as the Gnostics, as the original idea of the Savior, Messiah. The Messiah is a character which is an anointed king. I mean, according to Egyptian tradition, the king, every king of Egypt was a Messiah. Yeah, because when he goes...
So this is the idea of Messiah, came from Egypt.
Yes, the idea of a Messiah. And it was one of the rituals that the king has to go through during his coronation is for his phallus to be anointed by the fat of the crocodile. They thought this will give him a strong descendants and a special, power and so on. So the fat of the crocodile in Egypt, there was a holy crocodile in the temple, and the crocodile in Egypt was called Mesah. So the king, after going through this is a ritual, gets a title in a hieroglyphic with two crocodiles, which means Messiah. Meshi or Meshi, Messiah. This is the idea of a Messiah, the anointed one. However, every king is a Messiah in Egyptian tradition. However, the Messiah, the Redeemer Messiah is only one.
Who?
The one anointed one who was rejected by his people and killed. And his followers believed that he was resurrected from the dead. The Messiah Redeemer is only one. It's a unique one and not two. It cannot be repeated. But his story is living. I remember some years ago I met through a friend of mine, some Mason person, and he said that Christ might have gone to India because some kind of philosophy of he must have learned something from India. I told him it can't be, because you see the historical Christ, in my view, lived he was a contemporary of Moses. You see, for he lived and died a long time ago. However, his memory, his mission was not revealed before the 1st century AD through the line, the school or the followers of Hiram Abiff. This is the importance of Hiram Abiff. Now, it is through the Masonic teaching or writing that I started to realize who really could be Hiram Abiff, because although they follow the book of Kings and the book of Chronicles and the book of Samuel and so on, and they are the name they thought is Hiram or Huram, two names different.
What does it mean, Hiram Abiff?
Abiff means his father.
Okay.
And it is the Masons from the very beginning who started to regard Abiff is part of his name. Abiff means his father. So the translation of the Bible in English King James does not mention this.
So if he's Hiram Abi, like Hiram, his father, so what is his real name then?
Hiram Abiff. And that is very important, because when we come to identify the real Hiram, he's related to his father in his name.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not usual. Not everybody is his father's name comes after. Okay. Then again, and this is not found in the Bible. It is the Masonic thing from the very start. They also themselves don't know how it came to their. It must have been a memory, because when there was suppressed and their knowledge was some memory, some information passed generation orally to generation after generation, to the time when they, in the 17th century, started to reorganize themselves. So it must have been coming not from a book, not from the Bible, not from any text, but from ancient memory. Also, they have some other news, information about Hiram Abiff, which is not found in the Bible. And we don't know where it comes from. The idea of his killing, that he did not die from natural death. He died, although they think that he was killed by 3 ruffians who wanted to force him to give them the name, secret name of God. But I think this is a little bit fiction. But he did not historically die in a normal death. And then again, they say that the king found his body and he took him and resurrected him. At the time, if you look at the Old Testament, the first 5 books, the Torah of Moses, the law of Moses, you found no mention of the Spirit, even not the resurrection. The Spirit in Old Testament books only came later, especially in the books talking about this man has a spirit. Obviously we know from historical sources that the Egyptians, from the very early stage, from the time of the pyramid builders, recognized that man has a spiritual dimension that leaves the body, and that's why they mummified their people, because they were hoping that the spirit will come back. Only the Egyptian believed in the spirit, but the Egyptian also believed in the resurrection. The king, after his death, you see, he goes to be mummified, and after the complete mummification, rituals, his mummy is put in an standing position, and the priest will perform on him a ritual called the opening of the mouth, which then indicates that his spirit is alive, he has been risen. And the priest will shout, Osiris has risen from the dead. The second stage, obviously not physically risen, his spirit then goes to heaven, to the stars. This is the resurrection. It is a performed ritual only known in Egypt. So 2 things are not found in the Old Testament: the spirit and the resurrection. The later books of the Old Testament, which is a kind of prophetic books, which were only included in the canon of the Church of Rome, because they thought they were talking about Christ who will come, foretelling about the coming of Christ. In my belief, these prophets, Isaiah and these people, were telling about Christ who had already come. They kept his memory because, as I told you, I believe historical Christ was a contemporary of Moses. So they talk about him, you see. So no talk about the spirit in the Old Testament, except in the later books, not in the Torah. And the later books, of these people who the prophets, and all the work of the prophets, in fact, came used by the Church of Rome to make the Gospels of the New Testament. I mean, if you look at the Gospels, say, as the prophets say, a fulfilling of a prophecy, and they tell you the story. I mean, it is all. I mean, all prophecies. Nothing really historically happened. So this is what I want to tell you. So for the Masons to think that he was resurrected, it means that it had been in Egypt. It cannot be in anywhere else. Then again, there is I don't know if it is a knowledge coming from Masonic sources, but there is a kind of idea that Hermes, I mean, they also relate him with Hermes, Trismegistus,
yes.
And as I told you again, HRM, Hiram, HRM, the S is missing. If you add the S, so it could be a symbolic kind of way to hide his name with cutting the S off and so on. But they identified him with Hermes. Hermes is a Greek name for an Egyptian Thoth or Thoth, the god of knowledge and magic. You see, it is an Egyptian god, not a Phoenician god or a Hebrew god. It is an Egyptian god. So, in fact, and this is not found in the Bible. Not found in the Bible. What did they get it from? It has to be through memory, yeah. Tradition and memory. They started to wonder, and then again, they say that he was a contemporary. I mean, in this case, Hermes Trismegistus was a contemporary of Moses. Was a contemporary of Moses, not a contemporary of David or a contemporary of, but in reality he was a contemporary of Moses. And a contemporary of Solomon at the same time.
Yes.
I will talk about Moses next time.
Was he in the same time in history what you find the King Solomon as King Solomon time?
Yeah, obviously yes. You see, we come to history now.
Yeah.
The character whom somebody called Amenhotep, the same name as the king of Egypt, not the king of Tyre. The king, Amenhotep, son of Habu.
His name then, son of Habu.
Son of Habu. He's related to his father. He's related to his name is known.
The son?
Amenhotep, son of Habu. This is his name. Hiram Abiff. Hiram is related to his father. Amenhotep is son of Habu, related to his father in the same way.
So Habu was the name of his father?
Of his father, yeah. He was a follower.
He should have another name as well, don't you?
This is the name what we know about him. Amenhotep, the son of Habu. And he became known later on as different ways, as Asclepius, as Hermes, identified as.
Yeah.
But his name historically as Amenhotep, son of Habu. He was born in the Delta, in the eastern Delta, and he joined the church, the temple, and he became a worshipper of Thoth, which is Hermes.
So
from the beginning.
He was like a priest.
He was like a priest, and then he became responsible for some kind of work, building work, and then he was born at the time of Thutmose III, whom I identified as David, and he at the time of his great grandfather Amenhotep III, whom I identify as King Solomon. He appointed him as his master for buildings. All his buildings He built many temples and he was a great builder, responsible for thousands of builders. He was recruiting people to do the buildings. He is responsible for all his building, including his great temple in Malkata, which is next to his palace. He built the royal palace of the king, and next to it, the temple of mortuary temple of the king, exactly as it is in the Bible. That the King Solomon built a royal palace and a temple next to it. It is not found in Jerusalem. Nothing was found in Jerusalem, but here we found the two built by the same architect.
King Solomon temple was in Egypt, you think?
I think his Solomon temple is the mortuary temple of Amenhotep III in the west bank of the Nile, and the two pillars, which is the two statues of Amenhotep himself, the Memnon standing there. And in ancient times, when the facing the east, in ancient times, when the sun shines from the horizon, the first thing they come to the face of the statues before they come down to illuminate the whole land. You see, so it is.
So he has a statue, son of Habu, in Egypt.
He has many statues, because you see. I have to tell you first how he is related to Moses. You see, at the time. I will tell you about Moses later, but at the time,
we will have another part Moses, yes.
Amenhotep III had a son called Akhenaten, and this Akhenaten identified God as one with no image and called him Aton. You see, we know from a work, a historical work by some Egyptian historian called Manetho, who lived in the mid-3rd century BC during the time of Philadelphus the second. Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, and he wrote the story of that. He said at the time of Amenhotep III, he said that Moses is an Egyptian who lived at the time of Amenhotep III, and the son of Habu was feared about what is happening there. And he wanted, the king asked him, because the king wanted to see the god. And if he told him, if you want to see the god, you have to take these people away in the quarries and so on. But we know from the story that Amenhotep, son of Habu, was a contemporary of Moses, according to Manetho.
So the son of Habu was at the same time of Moses.
Of Moses, and at the same time Amenhotep III, whom I regard as. So from this we know that he was a contemporary.
So did you put the proof in your book about this?
Yeah, all this information is found in my book. And Manetho, the Egyptian priest who wrote the history of Egypt, at the mid-3rd century BC, wrote that Moses was an Egyptian, and he was a contemporary of Amenhotep III and a contemporary of son of Habu. You see, so this condition. Then again, they say, Manetho says, that when the problem of this, Moses and his followers with the king and so on, that for some reason Amenhotep, son of Habu, who was 80 at the time, committed suicide.
80
He was
years old.
80 years old, committed suicide, fearing on the fate of these people, followers of Moses. He was afraid for their fate, and he wrote a letter to the king telling him that he was killed. So the king found his body, resurrected him, made a ritual of resurrection, mummified him, and made a special.
Who was the king?
The king, Amenhotep III.
At that time, like
Yeah.
because you
And
said
he-
Amenhotep III is King Solomon.
Solomon. So this is a fulfillment exactly of the idea that nobody knows how the Masons got it. That the king found his body and resurrected him and buried him in a special tomb. This is historically what happened to Amenhotep, son of Habu, by Amenhotep Solomon. You see, this is exactly it is not found in the Bible. It's not found in any other source. But
This is like in the history with the proof.
it's a historical fact. It's not. It's a written
It's a
text.
fact. It's not just
No. It's written in hieroglyphic.
fantasy or anything.
This is all information written, translated in hieroglyph. The king found his body, and he found the letter that he wrote. Maniso says found the body, wrote but we know from that a king made a special tomb in the same area of the royal tombs. He made a tomb for not far from the temple he built really, although has not been found the tomb of son of Habu until now. And he placed his statue, the statue of son of Habu, in this temple of Amun, so people will go. Some people eventually, what happened? This will happen eventually after that they wanted to reach God through a mediator, and they wanted to ask son of Habu to get their message to God. And also, what I also have to tell you that, once the Masons recognized the connection between the architect and Hermes Trismegistus, they immediately regarded him as a healer. He was a healer, and he was a magician.
Yes.
As well as being an architect. And he was a philosopher who had followers. And these followers continued for more than 1,000 years until the time of the Gnostic Christianity in Egypt, before the Christian Gospels.
But the Gnostic started at Hiram Abiff time.
No.
After?
The Gnostic only started in the 1st and 2nd century AD.
Okay.
More about 13 centuries or 14 centuries from Hiram Abiff. But it started through his followers. Okay. He has followers. He have groups who followed his philosophy and carried on generation after generation after generation until the time came. I will explain you later when we come to the time of Christianity, how Christianity developed through the teaching of son of Habu, who was Hermes Trismegistus.
Yes.
You see, and how the whole idea of salvation of Christianity appeared through the line of this. Students or followers of son of Habu. So I think that son of Habu is the historical Hiram Abiff. I don't even need to say that. The Masons themselves know where did they get this information from. It's not in the Bible. It's not in any other source. They must have got it through the oral memory. But now I have it confirmed through the evidence. We have the evidence of son of Habu and how he was a healer, and people went to his tomb and they wrote. We have texts of people writing to him hundreds of years after the death, asking for him to help them. Cure their children or do that to him, and so on. Mediate with God. So I think the fulfillment of the Masonic idea, which is not found in the Bible. The Bible says Hiram sent his namesake to build a temple, and that's it, nothing more. But the whole rest of the story, we only find it in the Masonic teaching, and strangely enough, it's history. It's history.
So all the evidence about Hiram Abiff you put in your book, the temple of
No.
the temple of
No, the Egyptian origin.
the Egyptian origin of King David and the temple of Solomon.
Yes.
So all the evidence about Hiram Abiff is in the book, really?
All the evidence in the book, and I will show
Because I
also.
know your book, many people try to buy it, is still pre-selling on Amazon.
It's pre-selling. It will only come
When?
in the 5th of February next year.
Okay.
But I will show in my book how from Hiram, from son of Habu, from this time, how eventually his followers carried on, developed their philosophy, how the healing idea, and how he became identified. He's the same man as Asclepius, the healer, and Hermes Trismegistus, and how his vision of the world, the spiritual world, and the nature, eventually was responsible for the Gnostic philosophy of the 1st century AD. And obviously, this will confirm that modern Masons and Rosicrucians and so on did really come from Egypt.
So, but we can't wait until your book until comes out.
Yes.
So we would like to have another part maybe about the son of Habu or Hiram Abiff, if you don't mind.
I will talk about him, but not now, because now I have to start talking about Moses in history, about Jesus in history, and so on. When I come to the Gnostics, how Christianity appeared, then I would have to come back to
because we would like to know more about
obviously
Hiram
yes
Abiff,
obviously yes,
lots of details, lots of questions,
all
so we have a lot of things in mind.
You see, nobody knew about all these things, even the Masons themselves.
I'm sure that will be shocking.
When the book of Hermes Trismegistus was translated, this was a news. Knowledge. They didn't know that before. With the Nag Hammadi Gospels translated, they recognized the philosophy there. You see, they didn't know that before. The Dead Sea Scrolls have nothing to do with this. The Dead Sea Scrolls is a Judeo-Christian kind of idea, which came influenced Islam in Arabia. You see, but it's the Gnostics of Egypt, or Alexandria and Egypt, who produced Christianity, but they were persecuted by the church because their idea of salvation was different.
Do you mean, like you like to say, the idea of religion started from that time, Hiram Abiff time, or the people
you see,
after? So why do we need religion in life? Like, where the idea came from? Like, we need religion
because we die. If we didn't die, we didn't need religion. We need religion because we don't know where we go after. And what are we? Are we just a physical thing, or do you have a kind of a power, of a heat, of a energy which survives in the universe in some way?
The idea of religion, you mean it came from that time, before Jesus, before Christianity, before Moses?
No, Moses was the first one to recognize the unity of the holy being. Before that, in Egypt and all other countries, they have different deities, different separate powers. But it is the first one to recognize that there is a universal spirit. Like the human spirit, there is also a universal spirit. This is the first time Moses, that was the important thing of Moses, he recognized the importance of unity. The importance of Christ is that he took the second step, connecting the individual human spirit to the universal spirit.
Okay. Ahmed, Osman, thank you very much. Here I would like to remind people that Ahmed Osman has 7 books published: Moses and Akhenaten, Christianity and Ancient Egyptian Religion; The Hebrew Pharaohs of Egypt, The Lost City of the Exodus, Jesus in the House of Pharaohs, The Soul of Ancient Egypt, Breaking the Mirror of Heaven, and his new book, The Egyptian Origins of King David and the Temple of Solomon, is now pre-selling on Amazon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.